this cat?
Where'd the cat come from?
Well, that's people who are trying to sell services or property or whatever. And then over on this side, kind of the more official stuff, we've got the fire department and its minutes, we've got the school board and its minutes, we've got Shaw Islanders Inc., which is the community organization, and its minutes and board, and then let's look around on this side just so we can kind of get oriented as you're coming on to Shaw. Right up here at the ferry landing, and the Library and Historical Society is up here. This is the one slow, it is the four-way slow. Because hardly anybody actually stops. And the reason it's there is because the school is right across from us. And there's a little bit of a playground at the school, and we finally decided that everybody would be safer if they at least slowed down. Down here is the county park, which includes virtually all of this peninsula as well. And we'll get down there so you can see that. In this side of the park, you'll also see the newest addition to the island, which is a playground. Shaw had never had a play field before, and the community got together a year and a half ago and raised roughly $100,000 and built a play field on parkland. So we'll go down there. This is Blind Bay here, and historically this was where the commerce came and left. There was a fairly large dock that ran out down here, and back in the days when the island's principal commerce was chickens, eggs, and apples primarily, and sheep. All of that would funnel down, and boats would come in and out of there. Like everywhere else in western Washington, when Grand Coulee Dam was built, all the fruit went to the other side of the mountains. And by then it got too expensive for the sheep. The lime kilns were pretty well done by then, and so a lot of the wood cutting came to an end. So there's basically no livelihood kind of commerce on the island now, with one exception, and that's a company called Northwest Marine Technology. And they have a facility also in Anacortes out at the airport. They're a real interesting company that holds the patents for these microscopically coated pieces of magnetic wire that get inserted into the skull of salmon fry. You know, and if you're a fisherman, you know that if you catch a salmon that has the adipose fin clip, that's because it has one of these tags. These guys are the only business in the world that makes these things, and they sell hundreds of millions of them a year all around the world. And they are located right down here. They employ roughly 20 to 25 people on the island, ranging from PhD physics to high school graduates who do production kind of work. But a real important part of the island over the last now 40 years. It was started by a guy named Keith Jeffords, who was married to a woman whose family owned property right out here at the far end of Neck Point, and that's sort of the accident by which this business came to be on the island. There also are several very large pieces of property on Shaw. This whole area down here is owned by the University of Washington. This is what's called Cedar Rock Preserve. And if we have time, we'll go down there because it's quite a remarkable spot. You're looking down towards Cattle Pass, San Juan Island, Lopez Island. It's accessible. There are trails that run through it. It's more than a mile of shoreline. It's quite a deal. This whole peninsula over here is owned by the University of Washington. And then over here, there's a big section in here that comes up to here that is owned by the University of Washington. These were all gifted by the siblings who were children of a couple by the name of Ellis. And the other Ellis had pretty much all of this property here, and he wound up giving this property to Our Lady of the Rock Monastery, the Benedictine sisters, who have a monastery in here and a big dairy farm and raise lots of animals. They have a beautiful chapel in here. So sort of this whole part of the island, with the exception of a few spots down here, that's all University of Washington property. And then there's a really big piece out here that is basically this, all of this, which historically was owned by a family named Gratzer. And if you had come up here on the ferry before the last, probably 3 years ago, you would have seen a kind of a big house in the meadow just to the east of us here, and that was the Gratzer place. And it's now owned by a trust in Seattle, and they took down the house, and there's another house that they've built over there, but it's off in the trees. So you've got this big, huge piece, and then you've got pretty much all of this, and and everything else is in parcels that range from probably 100 acres down to small pieces along the shoreline. There are roughly 65 households on the island, and a year-round population of give or take 200 people. The way that we have figured out our best guess of the year-round population is to count the people who you would see in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day at the post office. And it kind of works. We tried to do it by registered voters, but we got an awful lot of people who have properties here who register to vote here, but they don't live here. They're weekenders, if that. So that's how we count our
What did the census say? What did the census say?
Well, the census is roughly the same number. To tell you the truth, we matched these numbers up back in 2000, but I don't think anybody did after that. Hey, Liz, 10:30 tomorrow at Neck Point. Huh?
Before the rain.
Yes, hopefully. Let's see.
What about the summer season population?
Summer season, we're an unusual place because we don't have any bed and breakfasts, we don't have any rentals, we don't have any restaurants. All we have are about a dozen campsites down at the community, at the county park. So that is kind of the only tourist trade that we get, with the exception of boaters who anchor out here and come in and go to the store. Otherwise, you know, we're the unusual island in that our summer is kind of like our winter, except we'll have people who come up as visitors, and we'll have summer people. it'll be around Memorial Day that we'll start seeing cars on the island we don't recognize. But by the end of the summer, pretty much you recognize them all. So I don't know what it's like on did you say it Guaymas or Guimas?
Guimas.
Guaymas.
Somewhere in between.
Okay.
It depends on who you are.
Okay. Do the old timers say it one way and the newcomers say it a different
Well,
way?
ask Jay.
What's that?
What's the correct way to pronounce the name? Oh, that's where the nun meets the ferry.
That's where the nuns met the ferry.
They have a chapel at the end of that building that is used now, yeah, at the end of this building, it's used now for music lessons. There's a marvelous musician and a music teacher who comes over twice a week from Orcas, and she teaches all the kids at the school, and then she teaches private lessons down here. And as a result, the school has its own ukulele orchestra. All the kids learn to play the ukulele, which is kind of an entry level to then learning other stringed instruments. And there's some really good musicians now on the island. So yeah, the chapel is still there. The rest of that building, for the most part, is warehouse to the store.
Does anybody live up above the store now?
Yes, the family that is running the store is living there now. And then they have also, population of the school right now, I think is 18, and next year it drops to 8. And so we go next year from 2 teachers to 1. And it's been as small as 2. Why don't we grab a few chairs and sit down for a minute? Because anything that happens on this community, 2 things. Volunteers, community pays for it. And there's always somebody who objects.
Let me add to that. They don't object when people are discussing what to do. After that group has formulated the plan, then they object at the final meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how it works. And so I'm glad to know that this is...
It's standard.
It's standard, yeah. And my theory when I moved here was, after kind of watching the lay of the land for a while, was it was so much easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes.
And so you just kind of charge ahead, and you know that somebody's going to think whatever you've done is a bad idea and never should have happened, but by then it's too late.
And they will forever say that they had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Right, even after it becomes really popular.
The other old saying about small communities is true, that if ever you don't know what you're doing, somebody else does.
I never heard that one, but boy, it's sure true. Yeah, there's, it has a very unifying effect on now. And it was controversial when it was done. There were people on the island that thought, we don't need a community center. In fact, we don't want a community center. And there were enough people who said, no, we need one. And once we build it, it will provide a lot to the community. So money was raised, and basically this building right here was constructed. And then a kitchen was added about 5 years later. And you see all these little Post-it notes here. The kitchen has just now been remodeled, renovated, and again, a community financed project. This was about just under $70,000, and the community contributed for that. This is where kind of everything on the island happens. There are weaving classes, spinning classes, musical events, Last night was a bingo night. Saturday night was a talent show. There's a small room that's been added over here, and it's for classes mostly. There'll be a yoga class in here this evening. Normally, right now, there would be a literature class going on taught by a former Claremont English professor who lives on Orcas. This is where the emergency medical technicians and the fire people do their training. The fire station is right there, and the EMS ambulance is right over there. We recycle on the island. Used to be that the county provided that, but the county no longer does, so the island provides it. Costs each household about $200 a year to be able to recycle, and we recycle more per capita than any of the other islands in the county.
Was this land donated, purchased, or how did you?
I believe this land was donated by a family that owned this whole section here. But that's a good question. I wasn't here then. I was here as a part-timer.
But you're the historian.
He might ask us questions.
I also was a journalist, and I'm smart enough not to answer questions that I don't really know the answer to. My career was mostly asking questions, not answering them. Let's see, there were a couple other things. Oh, one other thing that we do here that's kind of interesting. Twice a month, we put on a cocktail party and a sit-down dinner for all the people on the island who are 75 and older. It's all done by volunteers. It's become wildly popular, and it's a great way for people who have some difficulty getting out to be able to get out, and for all these people to see one another. Once they get here and have a glass of wine and an hors d'oeuvre, the noise level goes up like this. Of course, they're all half deaf too. And then a beautiful sit-down dinner that's served, and eventually we have to kind of push them out the door because they have such a great time. It's part of what makes this island such a delightful place to be, is that our friendships range from 95-year-olds down to 5-year-olds, and it's terrible for the kids because they have an unlimited supply of aunts and uncles, all of whom have their eyes peeled. So being able to get in trouble as a kid on the island, you really have to go work at it. The school is historic. It's the oldest continuously operating schoolhouse in the state of Washington. And this one goes back to 1896. There's been a public school on the island since 1892. And the original schoolhouse building is still being used. You'll see that it's been renovated in the last 2 years. And there now is an administration building that actually has bathrooms, replacing the old two-holers in the woods, and a second classroom for the upper grade students. Typically, it's kindergarten through 4 and 5 through 8. After 8, the kids ride the ferry, and they go either to Friday Harbor or Lopez. They can go to Orcas, but in the time I've been here, none of them have chosen Orcas. Friday Harbor is an advantage. It's a larger high school. You can walk from the ferry landing to the school, and there are lots more opportunities to get in trouble. Lopez, you have to ride a bus from the ferry landing. It's a much smaller school. There are more eyes on you. And it's probably not quite as good a high school. The one on Friday Harbor has been ranked in the top 10 in the state now for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's really it's a first-rate high school. And kids who go there
What
probably
age did you say they start going in?
in the 9th grade, freshmen in high school.
I see.
This year, there are, I think, 3 kids who are graduating from the 8th grade. And so one of the big events that we'll have here will be in early June, graduation for those 3. And that's a slideshow. One of the people who ran the general store dedicated a shelf to books, and people would come and leave a book and take a book. And then they sold the store, and she moved this to her house, which was right over here. And so people would come to her house and bring books and take books. And in the early 60s, there were some people who were motivated partly because of the library, but even more so because of the fact that there was no historical collection. And they were sort of the ones who led the push to create the Shaw Island Library and Historical Society. And a guy by the name of Malcolm Cameron, who went by the name Cooney. Behind you there's, and this thing over here, these line drawings, that's Malcolm Cameron's work. He was an illustrator and an architect. And he volunteered to design the Library and Historical Society complex. Land was purchased by 2 families on the island and donated. And Cooney donated his services, and then some islanders did the actual construction. And what you'll see when you go up there is basically the fruits of what Cooney had designed. There is a building that at one time was part of the original post office on Shaw. It's made of these huge cedar logs. It's an old log cabin. It was disassembled and reassembled up here to become the museum. It's quite a remarkable structure, but as a museum building, it has all the weaknesses that an old building like that would have. Bats can get in, mice can get in, but it's so historic that so far we've not taken the next step of building another display building. I would guess in the next 10 years we probably will. In the meantime, we're in the process now of building some new display cabinetry for it to better take advantage of the space, to better display some of the really important things that we have. And but what we really don't have is a good place for people to sit down with books that we've put together, with files that we've put together, with lots of documentary kinds of materials that it's possible to look at, but you have to go to some trouble to do it. So anyway, back in 1966, the Library and Historical Society was incorporated as a nonprofit. Bake sales and other small fundraisers, but mostly people just donating materials and time.
Why is everybody standing on the corner?
So you have a video there?
Yeah.
Don't get me in bed with it.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's even more historic when you're dodging bats.
Oh. But
We can't keep the bats out of
that's
here.
kind of, I hate bats.
Oh. Oh.
We have my grandmother's phone like that.
Well, this is quite a building. I never saw one quite like it.
Oh, does it smell good in here?
Yeah, everybody's got the same feeling.
Yeah, and it's those, must be those new, those look like new cedar shakes on the roof, are they?
They are, and one thing to look at when you go outside is look at the size of them. These are, I think they're 30-inch shakes. And one of the most valuable parts of our whole thing up here are the 30-inch shakes.
My goodness.
Yeah, they're kind of one of a kind. Let me just give you kind of an overview, and then what I'd like to do is kind of do a full tour, and then you can choose where you want to come back and spend more time. I mentioned this 1900 map with the information that goes along with it. So there's that. Over here we've got a number of binders. Shaw School 100-year celebration, local color, vital stats. These are mostly obituaries, which are, of course, important records to preserve. This one is homesteaders. This is a book that shows past exhibits in the library, and then it looks like we've got some early library history right here. These are our native artifacts with some explanation of what the various tools are and what they were used for. Earl Fowler's tool chest,
That is remarkable.
which is quite remarkable. This is by far the most unusual piece right here. This is a native ceremonial bowl, and you can see that it's carved so that there is a face to it. This was a gift. This one was done in about 1965, and all it is just showing the property owners at that time. And then there's another one here, the date of which must be probably 1950, that has, no, this is much earlier than that. This is probably 1920, and the property owners at that time. And then many of the names on these maps are reflected in the files that we have, so that there are ways to make connections. And then this is just, you know, a seasonal display. This is just a question. The library is open on Tuesdays from 2 to 4, Thursdays from 11. The reason there are all these boxes here is that part of our bylaws say that at our annual meeting every summer, any books that we are taking off the shelves will be offered first to the members. So we have a big book sale, which usually starts, you know, at some very modest price, and by the end we're trying to force boxes on people. It's said on Shaw that you never lock your car except for 2 times. One is if you
Okay, I want to see that. I think Barry'd like to go now. Okay. He always gets left out. Step up. Tiny bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me scoot around.
Happy you guys are
Said the wood was milled on the island.
There's a chair.
that around.
Here, these are the things that we have not been collecting. We're on rollers? Yeah, all right, I'm holding it. You're really getting your exercise, Jen.
Well, that's why I stayed in the car.
This is the workspace. These are items that at various times have been on display in the museum. We don't have enough room for them. And so what we've done is, protected them with this special paper in here and kind of tried to set them up so that somebody coming in can at least see these things. It's frustrating, as you guys know, to have stuff that you can't display. But what we mainly have here, these are all fireproof file cabinets. So they're protected. And what we have in here are named files of most of the families on the island now or going back probably 50 years. And let's see if I can just
Yeah, pick one out that we can.
pull one.
I'm doing this at home. I've got a file.
That's great.
Well, let's try Jeffers just out of curiosity.
Different family members.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we've
Oh,
got
yeah.
here. Well, see, now here's one.
Just as a
And
picture.
it just has a single photograph in it. And it's a baby shower for Kathy Melville, hosted by Elaine Ryan Jeffords, Grace Layton, Eunice Copper, Tootie Melville.